After I graduated from high school, the first of the many careers that I unsuccessfully pursued was at sea in the Merchant Marine, and I remember that one of the most attractive, or at least compelling reasons that I wanted to ship out in the first place were the tall tales that the old salts used to tell. Stories they told about incredible storms and tidal waves and ghost ships, and I was only 17 years old at the time, so their stories were just believable enough to give the sea a flavor of exotic romanticism that it really still holds for me. Maybe that's why I'm so willing to believe in the tallest tale of all, the latest sea legend of the Bermuda Triangle. It's also known as the Devil's Triangle, the Hoodoo Sea, and the Triangle of Death, and it's a huge section of the western Atlantic Ocean. Roughly the area bounded by the island of Bermuda, the north coast of Puerto Rico, and the southeast coast of Florida near Miami. Within this triangle of ocean, more than 1,000 seamen and pilots have disappeared, most of them within the past 30 years, almost all of them vanishing without a trace, leaving no wreckage or debris of either ship or aircraft. Some examples. In 1918, the U.S. Navy transport Cyclops lost with all 309 passengers and crew, with neither distress signal nor wreckage. In 1925, the Japanese ship Ryuki Maru sent this message: "Help, it's like a dagger, come quick, we cannot escape." It also disappeared without a trace. In 1963, the modern transport ship, the Marine Sulphur Queen, routinely reported its position near Key West, Florida, and then disappeared, leaving behind only a fragment of its nameplate. There have been many other ships that have mysteriously vanished, but the mysteries are by no means limited to surface vessels. Airplanes have also fallen prey to the Devil's Triangle. Shortly after the Second World War, two identical British passenger planes went down almost exactly 1 year apart. Both of them had been flying identical routes between Bermuda and Kingston and Jamaica. Both were flying in good weather, and both went down without a trace. In 1948, a DC-3 passenger plane en route from San Juan to Miami radioed for landing instructions, then was never heard from again. And there have been many others, including the loss of an entire flight of torpedo bombers, which we'll be talking about in a minute. Now, the explanations for these mysterious disappearances range from the mundane to the supernatural, all the way from variable weather conditions to UFOs and spacemen bent on kidnapping. Fueled by some recent best-selling books, the controversy and the speculation over the legend of the Triangle rages. Literally besieged by inquiries from curious, skeptical, or frightened people trying to find out whether or not ancient astronauts are indeed working their mischief on the area, the Coast Guard Command for the Southern District has put out its own brochure, logically explaining, or at least attempting to logically explain, what, if anything, is happening out there. Finding myself someplace between the curious and the skeptical groups, I sailed out into the Triangle aboard the Coast Guard cutter Point Barnes. Once out into the powerful Gulf Stream, about 15 miles off the coast, Lieutenant George Johnson gave us the official explanation.
We have over 9,000 search and rescue cases a year in this area, and obviously out of those we're not going to find all of them. Now, there are contributing factors down here that lead problems to our search and rescue. Among them is the Gulf Stream, which you can see right out to the starboard side here. It runs at about 5 to 6 knots. If a unwary sailor comes out, goes drift fishing, goes to start up his engine 3 hours later to head back into Miami, he might find that he's off of Fort Lauderdale. Have to head south, run out of gas, then drift. And he'd be drifting north at a rate of 5 to 6 knots per hour. If no one knows where he's gone, within a day or two, he could be 100 miles, 200 miles north of here. And that makes an awful large search area for the Coast Guard. In my experiences down here in the South Florida area, I found that truth is even more fantastic than fiction. It really is. Some of our cases, a science fiction writer could not think up, and they're documented facts.
What about the lost continent of Atlantis? What do you think about that?
I'm not saying that there couldn't have been a continent that sunk in ancient times, but as far as the ancient continent is below the water and sucking ships down there, I don't go along with that either.
Of course, there's another school of thought. It isn't all a lunatic fringe. Dr. Manson Valentine is a learned archaeologist who for the last 30 years has studied undersea formations within the Triangle. Gigantic stones that the doctor feels certain were placed there by ancient men of some unknown vintage. Men who were assisted perhaps by strange visitors from another planet.
This is actually evidence, the first evidence of artifactual phenomena on the bottom.
By artifactual, Doctor, you mean man-made?
This is definitely man-made. And offshore, may we have the next slide? There is a tremendous artifact which stretches at least a quarter of a mile before it goes under the bottom. This would be something that man would have erected for some strange reason we don't know, and are done by ancient people.
Which ancient man, Doctor?
Well, we don't know which ancient man, because our history doesn't go back farther than about 5,000 BC. We simply don't know who these people were, especially if there happens to have been, as is the case here, I think, a cataclysm which destroyed all civilizations, all traces of man, and sunk great bodies of land. It could easily be that we are dealing with a portion of ancient Atlantis. The next slide, Jim, please.
Is this one of the stones that you took from the area that you described?
This is a section of a stone.
In your opinion, did man place this stone where you found it?
I think man did, because we have evidence that these courses of stones are artificially positioned.
Do you think that there is any relationship between your findings and the phenomenon commonly described as the Bermuda Triangle or the Devil's Triangle?
I think that these people had space contact. I think that the ancients had much more space contact than we have today. That is, the UFO did play a considerable part, and very possibly, very likely, we are descended from some of these ancient people from elsewhere. We are not solely originating here. In other words, the human race can be, I believe, polyphyletic, with several origins, some of which are not definitely from the planet Earth. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does. Have you personally experienced any manifestations of strange physical forces in the area described by Bermuda and Puerto Rico and Miami?
We were on a boat near a little reef very close to Bimini. It's supposed to be a haunted reef because they see lights there all the time. And the natives of Bimini are very skeptical about this place and don't take fishermen out there any more than they can help. It is a dangerous place and has bad currents. But as we approached Moselle, our compass started spinning. It just spun like a top, round and round and round. And then after we progressed about 100 yards, it stopped. We turned around and tried it again. We got the same phenomenon. We did it 3 times. And there was something down there that was disturbing our compass.
Do you think it's all from the same force?
I think there could be a UFO under there, yeah. I don't think these people are here to harm us at all. I think actually they could be of great benefit to us.
Where did they come from?
If I were to tell you what I thought, you wouldn't even turn me off.
Try me.
Well, I think they're interdimensional. I think once you are in the magnetic field phenomena, you simply are at the mercy of the laws which form matter. You can be transformed into another dimension. There are worlds within worlds.
Captain Jim Richardson runs the flying school in Opelika, and he firmly supports the views of Dr. Valentine.
I've run into situations where there was the magnetic aberration of the magnetic compass revolving at an altitude of maybe 3,000 and 4,000 feet.
Captain, do you have any satisfactory explanation for the phenomenon that you've described, that you've seen?
I don't have any satisfactory explanation as such. Certainly, I don't get any explanation out of science as it presents itself. The only place I can get anything at all would be working with a person like Manson Valentine.
In modern times, perhaps the best documented and most hotly debated mystery of the Triangle is the disappearance in 1945 of 5 U.S. Navy Avenger-type torpedo bombers. They took off on a clear day from Fort Lauderdale Airport. It was a routine training mission similar to thousands of other flights from that same base. only this flight never came back. A rescue aircraft was sent after them, but it also vanished. 6 airplanes with a total of 27 men aboard, all lost without a trace. We went back to Fort Lauderdale Airport with Richard Weiner, probably the world's foremost expert on the mysteries of the Devil's Triangle and the author of a book by that title. Our intention was to duplicate as closely as possible that last and undoubtedly fatal flight of the 5 Avengers.
Well, more planes have taken off from here, flown out into the Triangle, and never returned than any other particular field. And the most spectacular was on December 5th, 1945, shortly before 2 p.m. in the afternoon. 5 Navy Avengers with 14 men, a mixture of Navy and Marine aviators, gunners, and navigators, were on a training mission. They took off from here. They flew over to a point south of Bimini where there's a wrecked ship on a reef. They made passes at this, mock torpedo runs, but they never made it back to the field.
Now, don't be too smug or skeptical, but because of the many insufficiently explained mysteries of the Triangle, we took along a self-proclaimed psychic named Dr. George Harrison. Before you start laughing out loud, let me add that in 1973, Dr. Harrison accurately told a team of searchers where they could find the wreckage of a recently crashed plane that they'd been searching for unsuccessfully for a full week. He came along with us to see if he could shed some light on this 30-year-old mystery.
What we'll do is take the feeling of the time and try to regress back to the moments that actually occurred.
Is it possible, really, 30 years later, to learn more about something that happened just simply with psychic sight?
Well, you have to understand that energy placed in motion continues in motion. So we have an energy field here that was established by these entities. So the thoughts are still there. The thoughts are energy. And these are what we're going to pick up. Go back and trace out the area, the time, and try to recommunicate with those thoughts.
We taxied across the field to the same takeoff strip used by the Avengers 30 years before. Then we took off, heading for the old concrete target ship lying off South Bimini Island, 50 miles out into the Triangle. The results of this attempt to recreate the unknown when we come back. That's right after this. The doctor began picking up the bad vibrations even before the coastline of Florida had disappeared behind us.
They did not head straight out this way. They headed to the right. They circled partially to the right.
Bill, can we approach those cement ships from a slightly southerly heading instead of the beeline course?
There's some sort of concern about equipment. The equipment seems to have to do something with the bombing runs.
The doctor's insights had been reinforced the day before we took off on this flight. In an effort to ensure that we'd covered all the psychic and supernatural bases in our investigation of the 5 vanished airplanes, I'd consulted another mystic. Her name is Paige Bryant, and she claims to have had at least 2 extraordinary experiences within the Devil's Triangle. And they revealed to her, according to her, what actually happened to the Avengers. She said that she was caught in an unknown energy force while flying over the area. It's a force she thinks was coming from an undersea UFO base, and a force that presumably snatched up the airplanes in 1945. Like Dr. Harrison, Paige projected herself back into time to relive the experience of the 5 Avengers.
As I flew into what seemed to be an energy field, I am now aware of malfunctions in the altimeter as well as in the compass. Flying into the clouds, there seems to be a mist, not unlike a fog, that consumes the area. I cannot see to the right or to the left any plane near me, although there are 4 others. I noticed after seemingly a spin that off in the distance to the right was a slit. Looked like light shining under a door. And my mind seems to feel that if I can get the plane nosed into and this slit or clearing, that I'll be all right. As the plane entered or neared this slit, I can feel it being sucked or pulled sideways, and the physical reaction is as if the chest area is being flattened The breath is thick. The tongue seemed to come out of the mouth. And I feel death.
And off they went, into the slit and into the twilight zone. Well, be that as it may or may not have been, just before we began our dive over the target ship, the compass in our airplane started to spin wildly. A shuddering chill went through my bones. Then Bill Lamos, our pilot, admitted that he'd been playing around with the compass. I said something to him like some joke. Our guy, Dick Weiner, is also a skeptic. Dick, essentially, what's your theory as to the disappearances of the ships and planes in this area?
Well, it's actually only a theory, but I attribute it to human error, mechanical malfunction, structural failure, weather or atmospheric phenomena, or magnetic anomaly. But I definitely, beyond all doubt, refute any theories of UFOs coming out here and kidnapping the people, time or space warps, or Atlanteans coming up from the deepest depths of the ocean and taking these ships and planes back down with them.
Then we were right over our target, the hull of a concrete ship wrecked during the Great Hurricane of 1926.
We are now about to make the exact same approach that the 5 Avengers did on December 5th, 1945.
Okay, Bill, can we take her down?
Starting down now.
Captain, we should approach it just above the wave tops, like a torpedo run.
Wreck is directly ahead.
You'll see it. It's up on the shelves about a mile in from the drop-off on the bank itself.
As we began our power dive, the pilot counted down.
We're at 900, 800, 750 feet, 700 feet, 600 feet, 500 feet, 400 feet, 300 feet, 200 at this time. Leveling off at 100 feet above the water. Starting run. There's your hub directly ahead on the horizon. We're approximately 2 miles due west of the hub of the bombing run. We're now about 75 feet off the water. 180 knots. Doing 180 knots at this time.
All right, we're on the exact torpedo run, thought to be taken by the Avengers now, and that's the Hulk, the target, coming up right on the horizon. How far away now, Captain?
About a mile, about 1 mile from the Hulk.
We're now approaching the coral ridge that borders the Great Bahama Bank. Now we're over water no more than 12 feet deep, at the very deepest.
At 180 knots, almost 200 miles an hour, we were approaching the Hulk at an unnervingly fast pace. When we were almost on it, Bill, who flew for the Marines during the big war, pulled up. It felt like we were in an elevator gone berserk, my stomach settling very uncomfortably into the area around my ankles. But that's just what happened to us. What really happened to the 5 planes in 1945, after they presumably made a successful torpedo run on the same target ship. No living person knows for sure, but Dr. Harrison was still picking up the energy fields, hot and heavy.
There's a fog's closed in. But they do hear something that sounds like a ham operator. They've put out a mayday, and there's a ham operator answers it. And they want a bearing, and they try to use that sound to head towards that sound, and they crash before they get here.
So they're all down now.
They were all down.